The phone call that shattered my world came at 1:247 a.m. on a Tuesday night that would redefine everything I thought I knew about family loyalty and the price of silence. "Mom, please," Tucker's voice cracked through the speaker, punctuated by shattering glass and a guttural roar I recognized as my brother's rage. Uncle Colt pushed me. He was screaming about the $3,800 you owe him. "Mom, I'm bleeding. There's so much blood. The bottles broke when I fell and I can't get up." The line went dead. My hands shook as I slammed my foot on the accelerator, my Volvo hydroplaning through torrential rain that had turned Portland's streets into rivers. Thunder cracked overhead, and every instinct I'd honed over 15 years as a child advocate attorney screamed that my 11-year-old son was in mortal danger from the one person I'd spent my childhood trying to protect. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt trapped between family loyalty and protecting those you love, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps me share these stories that need to be told. Leave a comment about your own experiences because I know I'm not alone in this. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. I was born Felicity Marie Vance 38 years ago in Northeast Portland, second child to Rufus and Della Vance. My brother Colt came first golden and adored the son who could do no wrong, even when he was doing everything wrong. I learned early that love in the Vance household came with conditions, and the primary condition was that you never challenged Colt. When I was 7 and Colt was 9, he shoved me downstairs because I'd picked up his abandoned toy truck. I landed hard, my wrist bent wrong. My mother found me crying at the bottom and said, "Felicity, you need to be more careful. You know your brother doesn't like it when you touch his things." That cast I wore for 6 weeks became my first lesson in the Vance family doctrine. Colt's comfort mattered more than my safety. I threw myself into studies, discovering that excellence was a kind of invisibility. Valedictorian at Grant High School, full ride to Lewis and Clark Law School, passed the bar at 25. I joined the Multnomah County Public Defender's Office, specializing in juvenile advocacy, met James Tucker, married quickly, and when I got pregnant at 26, I whispered a promise to my newborn son. "No one will ever hurt you the way I was hurt. I will protect you with everything I have." James left when Tucker was 3, unable to handle my family's constant drama. Colt's trajectory was a slow-motion car crash, dropped out of Portland State, cycled through dead-end jobs, picked up a gambling habit that devoured everything. By 35, he'd been married and divorced twice with restraining orders from both ex-wives citing abuse. But Rufus and Della remained steadfast in their delusion. Every time Colt showed up with a sob story, they opened their wallets. Every time I pointed out the pattern, they turned on me. "You've always been jealous of your brother," my mother would say. "That's not what family does, Felicity." So I stopped trying. I built my life around Tucker, worked my way up to senior counsel at Children's Defense Coalition, bought a house in Selwood with deadbolts on every door. I thought distance would keep us safe. I thought saying no to Colt's money requests would make him leave us alone. I was wrong. 3 weeks before that midnight call, Colt showed up at my office. He looked terrible, gaunt and bloodshot. "I need money. $3,800. I got in over my head with some guys who don't take IOUs." "No," I said simply. "I'm not funding your gambling habit." His face darkened. "This is about family helping family when he's in trouble." "Family," I repeated. "Is that what you call showing up only when you need something? Never asking about your nephew, never being there for anyone but yourself?" He lunged across my desk. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything Mom and Dad did for you, this is how you repay them. You're going to regret this, Felicity. You're going to learn what happens when you abandon family." I should have seen it as the threat it was. 2 days later, my mother called. Her voicemail was tight with disappointment. "Your brother came to us very upset. Your father and I helped him out this time, but you need to think long and hard about the example you're setting for Tucker." They'd given him the money. Of course they had. 38 years of enabling, and they still couldn't see what was obvious to everyone else. Colt was a black hole that consumed everything in his orbit. The following Tuesday started normally. I had an emergency custody hearing that ran until midnight. October rain pounded down as I packed up, thinking about Tucker safe at home with Mrs. Chen, our neighbor who watched him during late cases. I was thinking about anything except the possibility that my dangerous, desperate brother might collect his debt in person. My phone rang at 12:03 a.m. Tucker's name flashed and adrenaline shot through me. "Mom," his voice was small and scared. "Mrs. Chen left at midnight." I was getting ready for bed when Uncle Colt showed up, pounding on the door, yelling about money. I didn't want to let him in, but he said he'd wait for you, and I thought it would be okay because he's family. My blood ran cold. Tucker, go to your room, lock the door, and call 911 right now. Mom, he's asking for $3,800. He keeps saying you owe him, that you humiliated him. I told him you weren't home yet, but he's drinking from bottles in the recycling bin and getting angrier, and Mom, I'm scared. I was already weaving through traffic hazard lights, flashing, pushing the Volvo hard on slick roads. I'm coming. I'm 10 minutes away. Stay on the phone with me. That's when I heard Colt's voice in the background, slurred and vicious. Get your mom on the phone. Tell that bitch if she doesn't have my money, she's going to pay in other ways. Uncle Colt, please, Tucker said, his footsteps quick across our hardwood floors. She's on her way. Just wait. I'm done waiting. Your mom thinks she's better than me, thinks she can cut me off like I'm nothing. Tucker, run, I screamed. Get out of the house. I'm trying, but he's blocking the door, and he just grabbed my arm and he's pushing me toward the kitchen, and Mom, please help me. The sound that came next will haunt me forever. A crash. Shattering glass. Tucker's scream, high and terrified, and cut off too soon. Colt's voice sharp with panic. You little shit, look what you made me do. Tucker, I was sobbing, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Tucker, answer me. I heard him gasping, wet and painful. Mom, he pushed me. Into the recycling bin. The bottles broke. There's glass in my arm and it hurts so bad, and there's blood everywhere. I'm calling an ambulance right now. Stay on the line. I dialed 911, reported the assault, gave my address. 4 minutes away. 3, 2. My phone buzzed. Colt's number. I switched over, pure fury, replacing terror. What did you do? It was an accident. The kid got in my face, started yelling about respect and boundaries. He grabbed a bottle and came at me. I was defending myself. He slipped, fell into the recycling bin. It's not my fault. You're lying, I said flatly. Tucker is 11 years old and weighs 90 pounds. There is no scenario where you were defending yourself against a child. You weren't there. But I'm telling you, if you try to press charges, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of mother leaves her kid alone at night. I'll make your life hell. I hung up. Pulled into my driveway to find an ambulance already there, paramedics loading Tucker onto a stretcher. His left arm was wrapped in blood, soaked gauze, his face pale and streaked with tears. I ran to his side, grabbed his good hand. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. His eyes found mine, filled with pain and betrayal. Why did he do that, Mom? I just asked him to leave. I was polite. None of this is your fault, I told him fiercely. None of it. As the ambulance doors closed and sirens began their wail, I looked back at yellow crime scene tape being strung up at the recycling bin, tipped over with broken glass glittering in the porch light. And I made a decision 38 years in the making. This ended tonight. Atoria General Hospital's ER at 1 a.m. was fluorescent chaos. They'd rushed Tucker to a trauma bay while I gave my statement to a responding officer. That's when I saw him. Colt. In the hallway outside Tucker's room, talking to 2 uniformed officers with wounded innocents I recognized from 1,000 childhood infractions. I'm telling you, the kid attacked me, he was saying to the older officer whose badge read Vargas. I went to talk to my sister about a family matter, and her son lost it. Started screaming, grabbed a wine bottle, came at me swinging. I tried to deflect and he slipped. Self-defense, pure and simple. The younger officer Brooks was taking notes, uncertainty flickering in his eyes as he glanced at Tucker's room. That's when I noticed the restraints. Through the narrow window, I could see my son on the hospital bed, his wrists secured with zip ties, an officer standing guard. Ziptias. On an 11-year-old boy who was bleeding and terrified. Something inside me snapped. I strode down that hallway with 15 years of courtroom confidence. What in the absolute hell do you think you're doing? All 3 men turned. Colt's face flashed surprise fear, then settled on a smirk that made me want to commit violence. Felicity, he started with false concern. I was explaining to these officers that Tucker needs help. The way he attacked me tonight isn't normal. I ignored him, focusing on Sergeant Vargas. I'm Felicity Vance, the child's mother and senior counsel with the Children's Defense Coalition. I want to know on what legal grounds you've restrained an injured minor without parental consent. Vargas's expression shifted with recognition and wariness. He knew who I was. Ma'am, we responded to a 911 call. When we arrived, we found your son with significant injuries and this gentleman with minor defensive wounds. Based on his statement, we determined it was necessary to secure the child. Based on his statement, I repeated, my voice dropping to dangerous quiet. Let me understand. You responded to a scene where an adult man with documented history of violence and an active restraining order from his ex-wife was found with an injured child. And rather than securing the adult, you restrained the victim and accepted the assailant's version at face value. Brooks went pale. Vargas's jaw tightened. We didn't know about any restraining order. That's because you didn't run his name before traumatizing a child victim, which is fundamental failure of basic procedure. Officer Brooks, Sergeant Vargas. I'm formally notifying you that you're violating Oregon Revised Statute 419B5, which requires prioritizing minor children's safety in domestic violence situations. I'm also notifying you that every decision you make regarding my son is being documented for the civil rights lawsuit I will file if those restraints aren't removed in 30 seconds. I pulled out my phone, started recording. The time is 1:17 a.m. I'm documenting unlawful restraint of Tucker Vance, age 11, at Atoria General Hospital. Officers, your badge numbers, please. Vargas made a decision. Cut the restraints. Now. Brooks ran into Tucker's room and carefully cut the zip ties. My son immediately pulled his arms in, cradling his injured arm, his whole body curled protectively. I turned to Colt. As for you, I want you nowhere near my son. Sergeant Vargas, I'm formally requesting Colt Vance be removed immediately. I will be pressing full charges for assault on a minor child endangerment and violation of his existing restraining order. I have a restraining order against my crazy ex-wife, not against kids. Colt blustered, fear creeping into his eyes. The order specifically prohibits violent or threatening behavior toward any person, I said, pulling up the court order on my phone. And shoving an 11-year-old child into broken glass qualifies. Sergeant Vargas, you'll want to see this documentation. I forwarded it. His phone pinged. He read it, his expression hardening. Mr. Vance, wait in the family waiting room while we complete our investigation. Do not attempt to leave the hospital or contact the minor or his mother. This is bullshit, Colt spat, backing away. She's turning you against me. She always does this, always plays victim, always makes me look like the bad guy. Move. Now, Vargas said flatly. Security appeared, flanking Colt as they escorted him down the hall. He looked back once, his eyes meeting mine with pure, undiluted hatred. This wasn't the resentful brother I'd grown up with. This was someone who wanted to destroy me and had been willing to use my child to do it. I pushed into Tucker's room. He was sitting up, a nurse cleaning blood from his arm with gentle movements. The wounds were worse than I'd thought, deep lacerations from wrist to elbow, embedded glass glinting under fluorescent light. Baby, I breathed, moving to his side. Mom, he said, and then he was crying, great heaving sobs. He said you owed him money, that you were disrespecting the family. I tried to ask him to leave nicely, but he got angrier. Then he asked where we kept cash, and I said we didn't have any, and he grabbed my arm and said I was lying, and then he pushed me and I fell backward into the bin, and it hurt so much. I gathered him carefully into my arms and let him cry. The nurse left to get suturing materials. Sergeant Vargas appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Mrs. Vance, I need Tucker's statement. Is he up for that? I looked at my son, who nodded against my shoulder. Okay. But I'm staying right here, and if this becomes too much, we're stopping. Vargas pulled up a chair, activated his body camera. Tucker, tell me in your own words what happened. Start from when your uncle arrived. Tucker took a shaky breath and began. He described the pounding on the door, Colt's slurred words and aggressive stance, how Colt pushed past him into the house demanding to know where I kept my checkbook, how he ransacked the kitchen looking for cash or valuables. He was drinking from wine bottles we'd put in recycling, Tucker said, his voice small. From the dinner party last weekend. He kept getting louder, saying Mom was a stuck-up bitch who thought she was better than her own blood. I told him that wasn't true, that Mom worked really hard to help families, and he laughed and said I was just as brainwashed as she was. What happened next? Vargas asked gently. I tried to call Mom, but he grabbed my phone. Said she'd already ignored his calls and needed to learn to pick up when family needed her. Then he saw I'd been recording him on my voice memo app because I was scared and wanted evidence if something happened, and he got really mad. He threw my phone against the wall and it broke. Smart kid. Brave kid. Is the phone still at the house? I asked. Tucker nodded. On the kitchen floor? I made a note to tell crime scene techs. If that recording captured even part of what happened, it would corroborate Tucker's story. So he threw your phone then, what Vargas prompted. He grabbed me by the shirt, dragged me toward the door. Said if Mom wouldn't come to him, he'd take me to her. make her choose between her precious career and her kid. But I pulled away and his hand slipped and he stumbled, and I guess that made him really angry because he just shoved me as hard as he could. I went backward into the recycling bin. The bottles broke when I landed. The glass went into my arm and it hurt so bad I couldn't even scream at first. He was trembling, reliving it. I held him tighter. Did you at any point have a weapon in your hand? Did you threaten your uncle or attempt to hit him? No, Tucker said firmly. I never touched him except when trying to get away. I know I'm not supposed to hit people even when I'm scared. Mom taught me that. She taught me to get away and call for help. Vargas nodded, then stood. Thank you, Tucker. You did the right thing. Mrs. Vance, can I speak with you in the hallway? I kissed Tucker's forehead, promised I'd be right back, and followed Vargas out. Brooks was waiting with his notepad filled with dense handwriting. We've got a problem, Vargas said bluntly. Or rather, your brother has a problem. Officer Brooks pulled recordings from your home security system. You have cameras, right? Front door, back door, and driveway, I confirmed. I installed them last year after a break and scare. The back door camera has a clear view of your kitchen through the window, Brooks said, pulling up his tablet. We can see the whole thing. Your brother forced entry through the unlocked back door at 1231 a.m., Tucker trying to block him, clear aggressive posture from your brother, and then at 1244, we have him grabbing Tucker and throwing him into what appears to be a recycling bin. No defensive actions from Tucker at all. He's backing away the entire time. He turned the tablet so I could see. There was my kitchen, our cheerful yellow kitchen transformed into a nightmare scene in grainy night vision green. My brother, clearly twice Tucker's size, advancing on my son like a predator. Tucker's body language was unmistakable, hands up, placating, backing away, no threat at all. Then the shove. Brutal. Deliberate. Tucker flying backward into the bin, the impact his body going rigid with pain. That's felony assault on a minor, Vargas said. Child endangerment. Unlawful entry. And given the restraining order violation of a court order, we're taking him into custody. Wait, I said, pulling up my email. There's more. 3 weeks ago, Colt came to my office demanding $3,800 for gambling debts. He threatened me when I refused. I documented everything in a memo to my supervisor. I forwarded the memo. Vargas read it, his expression darkening. He told you that you'd regret refusing him, that you'd learn what happens when you abandon family. That's premeditation. This wasn't heat of the moment. He planned this. The pieces were falling into place, the story my brother tried to construct crumbling under evidence weight. But I needed more. I needed this airtight. I need to make some calls, I said. First call was to Kim Ramirez, an assistant district attorney I'd worked with on dozens of child welfare cases. She picked up on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Felicity. It's almost 2 a.m. What's wrong? I told her everything. The demand for money. The assault. Tucker's injuries. The evidence we'd gathered. When I finished, there was silence. Holy shit, Kim finally said. Is Tucker okay? Physically, he will be. Emotionally, I don't know. Kim, I need you on this case. I need someone I trust to make sure this doesn't get plead down or dismissed. My brother has skated on consequences his entire life, and tonight he nearly killed my son because I wouldn't fund his gambling. Send me everything, Kim said, and I heard rustling as she got out of bed. I'll be at the hospital in 45 minutes. And Felicity, I'm so sorry. For what it's worth, you're doing everything right. You're protecting your son. That's what matters. Next call was to my boss at Children's Defense Coalition. Margaret Stowe answered immediately, voice alert, despite the hour. What do you need? She asked, bypassing pleasantries. Emergency leave starting immediately. And I need you to recommend a family therapist who specializes in childhood trauma. Someone who can see us within 48 hours. Done and done, Margaret said without hesitation. How's Tucker holding up? He's scared. Hurt. Confused about why his uncle would do this. He keeps asking if it's his fault. Margaret made a noise of pure rage. That beautiful boy has never done anything wrong. You tell him, miss. Margaret says he's the bravest kid she knows, and that sometimes adults make terrible choices that have nothing to do with anything children did or didn't do. And Felicity, take all the time you need. Your job will be waiting. I hung up and allowed myself exactly 30 seconds to cry. To let the terror and fury and grief wash over me in that sterile hallway. Then I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and went back into Tucker's room. The ER doctor was examining the lacerations under bright light. We're going to need x-rays before I close these. I want to make sure we get all the glass fragments out. Some of these pieces are pretty deep. Do whatever you need to do, I said. 2 hours later, Tucker was in recovery from minor surgery. They'd found 17 pieces of glass embedded in his arm, some as deep as muscle tissue. The surgeon told me he'd been lucky that none hit a major blood vessel or nerve. Lucky. As if there was anything lucky about what my brother had done. Vargas found me in the surgical waiting room at 4:30 a.m. We picked up your brother at his apartment trying to flee. He'd packed a bag and was headed to his car when our officers arrived. That's consciousness of guilt right there. What about my parents, I asked, because I knew Rufus and Della would already be working to spin this to protect their golden child. They're in the waiting room downstairs demanding to see their grandson and talk sense into you. Hospital security is keeping them contained, but they're making quite a scene. Of course they are, I said bitterly. They've spent my entire life choosing Colt over everyone else. Why would tonight be any different? Do you want me to remove them? I thought about it. About 38 years of being the daughter who was never quite enough, never quite worthy of the unconditional love they showered on Colt. About every time they dismissed my pain, told me I was being dramatic. About the fact that even now, with their grandson lying in a hospital bed with 17 stitches, their first instinct was to defend their son. No, I said slowly. Let them stay. Because I'm about to make something very clear and I want witnesses. When Tucker was moved to a regular pediatric room at 6 a.m., I finally allowed Rufus and Della to come up. They burst through the door with the energy of people who believed they were the wronged party faces set in identical expressions of righteous indignation. Felicity Marie Vance, my mother started, voice shrill. What have you done? Your brother is sitting in a jail cell because of you. I held up a hand. Tucker is sleeping. If you wake him with your theatrics, I will have security escort you out immediately. Do you understand? She pressed her lips together, eyes darting to Tucker's small form under the white blanket, his bandaged arm resting on top. Some wind seemed to go out of her sails. My father stepped forward, expression softer but no less determined. Sweetheart, we need to talk about what really happened. Colt says it was an accident that Tucker got confused. Tucker didn't get confused, I said, my voice deadly calm. Colt broke into my house at midnight drunk and demanding money I'd already refused. When Tucker tried to call me, Colt threw his phone against the wall and physically assaulted him. He shoved my 11-year-old son into broken glass with enough force that Tucker required surgery to remove 17 glass fragments. The entire assault was captured on my security cameras. There is no confusion. There is no accident. There is only your son's choice to hurt a child because he didn't get what he wanted. But the gambling debts, my mother said, her voice taking on that wheedling tone. Those men were threatening him, Felicity. He was desperate. He just needed a little help to get back on his feet. I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and somehow never managed to actually see me. Did you give him the money? She looked uncomfortable. We helped him out. That's what family does. How much? $3,800, my father admitted. We took it from our savings. We were going to ask you to reimburse us once you'd calmed down. There it was. The pattern laid bare. They'd enabled Colt's gambling, given him the money he'd tried to extort from me, and now they wanted me to pay them back for the privilege of watching my brother nearly kill my son. I reached into my purse and pulled out papers I'd found when I'd gone home briefly at 5 a.m. Betting slips. Dozens of them from the past 3 months, totaling amounts that made my stomach turn. I found these in your trash can, Mom. Right next to where you keep your checkbook. Colt hasn't been gambling at some underground casino with dangerous people. He's been betting on sports through a legal online platform. The only people threatening him were his own poor impulse control and addiction. And you've been funding it. For how long? My mother's face went pale. My father reached for the betting slips, hands shaking as he flipped through them. Della, you told me you'd cut him off after the last time. He promised he'd stop, she whispered. He said he just needed one more chance to win it back. There is no winning it back, I exploded, my voice echoing. Tucker stirred and I forced myself to lower my volume. There is only the next bet and the next debt and the next desperate scheme. And tonight, when I refused to be part of that cycle, Colt decided hurting my child was acceptable punishment. Do you understand that? Your grandson has 32 stitches because you couldn't say no to your son. The door opened and Kim Ramirez walked in looking sharp and professional, despite the early hour in a charcoal suit carrying a briefcase full of charging documents. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, I'm Assistant District Attorney Kimberly Ramirez. I need to speak with Mrs. Vance and Tucker about the case we're building against Colt Vance. I'm going to have to ask you to step outside. Now wait just a minute, my father blustered. We have a right to be here. That's our grandson. And I have a right to protect my son from anyone who might interfere with his recovery or influence his testimony, I said coldly. Which includes people who have demonstrated they prioritize Colt's comfort over Tucker's safety. Kim, they can wait in the family lounge. My parents left, but not before my mother turned back. You're tearing this family apart, Felicity. When you're old and alone, you'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I told her, is waiting 38 years to stand up to you. The door closed with a soft click that felt like a door closing on my entire childhood. Kim sat down next to Tucker's bed, pulled out her tablet. Okay, let's go through what we have. The security footage is damning. Tucker's statement is consistent and credible. The physical evidence supports his account completely. But I want to make sure we have everything before arraignment. What about the phone, I asked. Tucker said Colt threw it after discovering Tucker was recording. Crime scene techs recovered it. Screen is shattered, but data is intact. We have a 4-minute recording of Colt threatening Tucker, demanding cash, and explicitly stating he's going to make you pay for disrespecting him. The audio is clear. You can hear Tucker asking him to leave multiple times. You can hear the fear in his voice. Something loosened in my chest. So there's no way he can claim self-defense. None. We're charging him with assault in the second-degree Class B felony. Child abuse in the first degree, also Class B felony. Burglary in the second degree for unlawful entry. And violation of a restraining order. We're looking at a sentencing range of 7 to 10 years if convicted on all counts. 7 to 10 years. A significant chunk of Colt's life, but barely a fraction of the impact he'd had on mine, on Tucker's, on every person unlucky enough to orbit his chaos. What about a plea deal, I asked, because I knew how the system worked. Kim looked me dead in the eye. I don't do plea deals for people who hurt kids. Not when the evidence is this solid. Your brother is going to trial and he's going to lose. Tucker woke around 8 a.m. groggy from pain medication, but alert enough to ask questions. I sat on the edge of his bed and took his good hand. What's going to happen to Uncle Colt, he asked, voice small. He's going to go to prison for what he did to you, I said gently. Because what he did was wrong, and in our country, people who hurt children face consequences. But he's family, Tucker said, echoing words beaten into both of us. Family isn't an excuse to hurt people, I told him, smoothing his hair back. Family should be people who protect you, who make you feel safe, who would never deliberately cause you pain. And if someone who shares your blood doesn't do those things, then they don't deserve to be called family. Do you understand? He nodded, slowly processing. Grandma and Grandpa were really mad at you. I know, baby. They're having a hard time accepting that Colt did something unforgivable. But that's their problem to work through, not yours. Your only job right now is to heal and feel safe. I don't think I want to see them for a while, Tucker admitted. Is that okay? That's more than okay, I assured him. In fact, I'm going to make sure they can't come near you until you're ready. If you're ever ready. Over the next 3 days, while Tucker recovered in the hospital, I built the case of my life. I contacted Colt's ex-wives, both of whom agreed to provide testimony about his violent tendencies and manipulation. I tracked down 3 former employers who detailed his theft and dishonesty. I got statements from neighbors who'd witnessed his late-night rages and property damage. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Marcus Hale, Colt's cellmate during a 30-day stint in county jail 2 years earlier, reached out through Kim. He'd seen news coverage of Colt's arrest and wanted to talk. I met him in an interview room at the county jail, where he was serving time for fraud. Marcus was mid-40s, weathered and tired, but his eyes were sharp. Your brother talked a lot when we were bunked together, Marcus said without preamble. Bragged about how he'd been working his family for money his whole life. Said his parents were good for at least $1,000 a month if he played them right, and his sister was sitting on a nice salary that she was too selfish to share. He had this whole plan worked out for how he was going to get you to pay off his debts. What kind of plan, I asked, though part of me already knew. He said family was leverage. Said you had a kid and kids made people vulnerable. Said if you wouldn't pay up voluntarily, he'd find a way to make it necessary. Either by causing a problem that required your money to fix, or by making it clear what would happen if you continued to refuse him. The room felt very cold. He told you he was planning to hurt my son. Not in those exact words, Marcus admitted. But yeah, that was the implication. He said something like, "People always pay when their kids are involved. Fear is a better motivator than love." I thought he was just talking shit. But when I saw the news, I knew I had to say something. I got kids of my own. What he did, that's not right. Kim recorded Marcus's statement, had him sign a sworn affidavit. It was the final piece we needed to prove premeditation to show this wasn't a crime of passion. Colt had planned to hurt Tucker. Maybe not that specific night, maybe not in that exact way, but the intent had been there germinating for years. The next weeks were healing and preparation. Tucker came home with restrictions: no sports, no heavy lifting, physical therapy 3 times a week. The physical wounds would heal. The psychological ones would take longer. We started seeing Dr. For Sarah Chen, a trauma specialist who worked with child victims of violence. She had a gentle manner and a cozy office that felt nothing like a clinical setting. In our 3rd session, she asked Tucker to draw what he was feeling. He drew our house with a large dark figure standing outside trying to get in. Inside, he drew himself and me holding hands. Between us and the dark figure, he drew a wall made of colorful bricks. "Tell me about the wall, doctor," Chen said gently. "That's the boundary Mom talks about," Tucker said. "The one that keeps bad people out and good people safe. Mom says we get to decide who we let in our house and our family, and that blood doesn't mean someone gets to hurt us." "Doctor," Chen looked at me with approval. "Your mom is absolutely right. How does the wall make you feel?" "Safe," Tucker said simply, "but also sad. Because I wish Uncle Colt could have been on the inside of the wall. I wish he'd chosen to be the kind of person who belonged there." I had to excuse myself to cry in the bathroom after that session. My parents made several attempts to contact me in those weeks. Phone calls I sent to voicemail. Letters I returned unopened. They even showed up at my house one evening, pounding on the door, demanding to see their grandson. I called the police. Officer Brooks responded and helped me file for a restraining order. The temporary order was granted within 48 hours. Rufus Della and Colt Vance were prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me or Tucker. The final straw came when my mother violated the order by confronting me in the parking lot of Tucker's school. She grabbed my arm, face twisted with anguish and rage. "You've destroyed this family," she screamed. "Your own flesh and blood is sitting in jail, and you don't even care. What kind of daughter are you?" I looked at her, this woman I'd spent decades trying to please, and I felt nothing but vast emptiness where my love for her used to live. "The kind of daughter who protects her child," I said quietly. "The kind of sister who refuses to enable abuse. The kind of woman who finally understands that family is something you choose, not something you're cursed with." "Let go of my arm or I'm calling the police for violation of a restraining order." She let go. Backed away. "You'll regret this. When we're gone, when you have no one left, you'll regret cutting us out." "No," I said with absolute certainty. "I really won't." I reported the violation. My mother spent the night in jail and was released with a stern warning. After that, they stopped trying to contact me. Colt's trial began on a cold Monday in December, 6 weeks after he'd assaulted Tucker. The courthouse was packed with reporters. Kim had warned me the media attention would be intense, but I'd underestimated how invasive it would feel to have cameras in my face. Tucker didn't attend. "Doctor," Chen advised against it. Instead, he stayed home with Mrs. Chen working on the journal. "Doctor," Chen had suggested. "He'd write me letters each day telling me he loved me and believed in me." I kept those letters in my briefcase and read them every time I felt my resolve wavering. The trial lasted 5 days. The prosecution presented their case methodically, security footage showing Colt's violent assault, the 911 recording capturing Tucker's terror, medical evidence documenting his injuries, the recording from Tucker's phone, with Colt's threats clearly audible. Marcus Hale testified about Colt's premeditation. Colt's ex-wives testified about his pattern of violence and manipulation. The defense tried to paint Tucker as a troubled child who'd provoked his uncle, who'd lied to get attention. They suggested I'd coached him, that I was using this to settle old family scores. Then Tucker took the stand. I'd tried to prepare him, but nothing could really prepare an 11-year-old for that experience. He walked to the witness box in his best shirt and tie, his injured arm still wrapped in a protective brace. The bailiff swore him in, and he sat down in the oversized witness chair with his shoulders squared and chin up, looking braver than any child should have to be. Kim questioned him first, keeping her tone gentle. Tucker told his story clearly, chronologically, with none of the embellishments that might suggest coaching. He admitted when he wasn't sure about something. He cried when he described the pain of glass cutting into his arm. He looked at the jury when he said I just wanted him to leave. I kept asking him to please go, and he kept getting angrier. The defense attorney was harder. Isn't it true that you resented your uncle? That you thought he was taking money away from you and your mother? No, sir, Tucker said politely. I didn't think about Uncle Colt much at all. We didn't see him very often. But you knew your mother had refused to give him money. I knew Mom said she wasn't going to help him gamble anymore. That's not the same as refusing to give him money. Mom gives money to lots of people who need it. She just doesn't give money to people who are going to hurt themselves or others with it. And you recorded your uncle without his knowledge or consent. Isn't that right? Yes, sir. Mom taught me that if I'm ever scared or feel unsafe, I should try to document what's happening. She said evidence can protect people when words aren't enough. So you were planning to use that recording against your uncle. I was planning to use it to stay safe, Tucker corrected. I thought if I had proof of what he was saying, people would believe me if something bad happened. And I was right. The defense attorney had no response. When Tucker stepped down from the witness box, he walked straight to me. I wrapped him in my arms and felt him trembling with relief and exhaustion. You did so good, baby, I whispered. I'm so proud of you. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, not one of them would look at Colt. That's when I knew we'd won. On the count of assault in the second degree, how do you find guilty? On the count of child abuse in the first degree, how do you find guilty? On the count of burglary in the second degree, how do you find guilty? On the count of violation of a restraining order, how do you find guilty? Guilty on all counts. Colt's face went white, then red, then mottled purple as reality sank in. He turned to look at me, his mouth working soundlessly, and I stared back with no pity, no regret, no familial obligation to soften the blow. This was justice. This was protection. This was what happened when you chose violence over compassion, when you leveraged family bonds as weapons, when you hurt a child because you couldn't get your way. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Huang heard statements from both sides, the defense asking for leniency, citing Colt's difficult childhood and addiction struggles. The prosecution arguing for maximum sentence given the premeditation, the vulnerability of the victim, and Colt's complete lack of remorse. Kim asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I did. I stood at the podium in that courtroom and looked directly at my brother. Colt Vance came to my home in the middle of the night drunk and enraged that I wouldn't fund his gambling addiction. He found my 11-year-old son alone and vulnerable, and he made a choice. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A choice. He chose to terrorize a child. He chose to use violence as punishment. He chose to shove my son into broken glass with such force that Tucker required surgery and will carry scars for the rest of his life. Those scars are not just physical. My son has nightmares. He's afraid of unexpected knocks on the door. He flinches when someone speaks too loudly. Colt Vance didn't just hurt Tucker's body that night. He hurt Tucker's sense of safety, his ability to trust his understanding of what family should mean. I paused, gathering composure. But more than that, Colt Vance represents a pattern of abuse that has been enabled and excused for 40 years. My parents, Rufus and Della Vance, have spent decades funding his addiction, making excuses for his violence, and expecting everyone around them to sacrifice their own safety and well-being to protect their son from consequences. They chose him over me my entire childhood. They chose him over their grandson when he was bleeding and traumatized. And I am here to say that those choices end now. I am formally severing all ties with Colt Vance, Rufus Vance, and Della Vance. No visits. No phone calls. No letters. No reconciliation. They chose this path when they chose enablement over accountability. Let this be my final statement on the matter. Blood does not excuse abuse, and family does not require forgiveness. I sat down. Tucker, sitting beside me, slipped his hand into mine and squeezed. Judge Huang looked at Colt with profound disappointment. Mr. Vance, you attacked a child in his own home because his mother refused to enable your addiction. You have shown no remorse, no accountability, and no insight into the harm you've caused. The court sentences you to 10 years in prison on the assault charge to run consecutively with 5 years for child abuse, 3 years for burglary, and 1 year for violation of the restraining order. Total sentence 19 years with no possibility of early release. Additionally, upon your release, you will be permanently prohibited from any contact with the victim or his mother. Bailiffs remove the defendant. 19 years. Colt would be nearly 60 when he got out. As they led him away, he looked back one final time, and I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. Not of prison, but of irrelevance. Of being forgotten. Of realizing that the power he'd wielded over me for 38 years was finally irrevocably broken. My mother's wail echoed through the courtroom, but I didn't turn to look at her. That part of my life was over. The year that followed was about rebuilding. Tucker and I moved to a new house in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew our story. I took 3 months leave to focus on his recovery and my own healing. We traveled to the Oregon coast, where Tucker collected sea glass and built sandcastles, and gradually started to smile again without that shadow of fear behind his eyes. When I returned to work, I did so with a new mission. With Margaret's support, I founded Coastal Kids Legal Aid, a nonprofit providing free legal services to children and families affected by domestic violence and abuse. Tucker became the face of our awareness campaigns, sharing his story with bravery that humbled me daily. He spoke at schools, at community centers, at legislative hearings about the need for better protections for children. He told anyone who would listen, family isn't an excuse. Love doesn't hurt, and kids shouldn't have to pay for adult problems. 1 year to the day after the assault, we held a celebration at our new office space. 50 people packed into the converted warehouse we'd transformed into a welcoming hub for families in crisis. There were balloons and cake and speeches from local officials. Tucker cut the ribbon with oversized scissors, grinning at the cameras, the scars on his arm visible beneath his rolled-up sleeves. He'd refused to hide them. "They're part of my story," he'd told Dr. Chen, "and my story might help someone else." That night, after the celebration wound down and Tucker was asleep in his new bedroom, my phone rang. Kim's name flashed on the screen. "I thought you'd want to know," she said without preamble. "Colt was involved in an incident at the prison today. He'd been gambling again, apparently found a way to run a betting ring behind bars. He owed another inmate money and couldn't pay. The inmate attacked him with a homemade shiv, punctured his spinal cord. He's going to survive, but he's paralyzed from the waist down. They're transferring him to the state medical facility indefinitely." I should have felt something. Triumph, maybe, or pity, or complicated grief. Instead, I felt nothing but bone-deep relief that he would never ever be able to hurt my son again. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "How are you doing with it?" Kim asked gently. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. He made his choices. This is just the natural consequence of a lifetime of those choices. I spent 38 years being collateral damage in his chaos. I'm done with that now. After we hung up, I walked out onto the back deck of our new house and looked up at the stars. The Oregon night was clear and cold. Somewhere out there, my brother was learning what it meant to be truly powerless. Somewhere out there, my parents were probably mourning the son they'd enabled into destruction. And here I was, free of all of it. Free to build a life based on chosen family, on healthy boundaries, on the revolutionary act of putting my child's safety above toxic loyalty. I heard Tucker's footsteps behind me. "Can't sleep?" I asked, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Had a dream," he admitted. "Not a nightmare. Just a dream about the old house. Remembered some good times we had there before everything happened." "There were good times," I agreed. "Those are yours to keep. The good memories don't erase the bad, but the bad doesn't have to destroy the good either. You get to decide what you carry forward." He leaned against me, solid and warm and alive. "I'm glad we got out, Mom. I'm glad you chose me. Always," I whispered into his hair. "I will always choose you." Today, Tucker is 12 years old. The scars on his arm have faded to thin silver lines. He's back to playing soccer, has straight A's, and laughs more than he cries. He volunteers at Coastal Kids Legal Aid every Saturday, helping younger children feel safe enough to tell their stories. Whatever he becomes, I know he'll be amazing. Because he learned early what some people never learn at all, that you teach people how to treat you, that boundaries aren't cruel, and that the most important family you'll ever have is the one you choose to build from love and respect and mutual protection. As for me, I sleep soundly now. No more midnight phone calls. No more wondering when the next crisis will erupt. No more managing other people's dysfunction at the expense of my own peace. I built something good from the ashes of something toxic, and every child we help at Coastal Kids Legal Aid is proof that survival is only the beginning. Thriving is the goal. I learned something from my son, actually. Tucker, who was wise beyond his years, who told me one day over breakfast, "Just because someone says they're sorry doesn't mean you have to let them back in. Sorry is just a word. Changed behavior over time is what actually matters." He's right. He's always right about these things. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. You don't owe anyone access to your life, not even family. Especially not family who has proven they value their comfort over your safety. Blood relation is not a free pass for abuse. Forgiveness is not mandatory. Walking away is not weakness, it's wisdom. I protected my child when the people who should have protected me failed to do so. I broke a cycle that had been spinning for generations. I chose love over loyalty to people who weaponize that loyalty. And I would make the same choice every single time without hesitation, without regret, without apology. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is this. Is your child safe? Is your home peaceful? Can you sleep without fear? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you've made the right choice no matter who disagrees. My son is safe. My home is peaceful. I sleep without fear. And that more than any family reunion or deathbed reconciliation or forced forgiveness is what success looks like. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved because staying would destroy you? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's support each other in making the hard choices that lead to actual healing. And if this story resonated with you, if you saw yourself in Tucker's fear or my determination or the toxic patterns I finally broke free from, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone, that walking away is valid, that protecting yourself and your children is not selfish, it's survival. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have cut off your family or tried to maintain some kind of relationship? I'm genuinely curious about your perspective, so leave a comment and let's continue this conversation.